So I've been using the iPhone 15 Pro for a couple weeks now, and as a videographer and a filmmaker, I gotta say it's kind of turned my world upside down. The footage that I've been able to get out of this phone has been so good that I found myself reaching for it over a lot of my professional camera equipment, and that's caused a little bit of a problem. Let's think of it from a philosophical perspective. What does it mean if I am opting for a phone over my mirrorless camera? Does that make me lazy? Does it make me unprofessional? Does it mean I'm settling for a lower production quality? Or we could look at it from a technical perspective and efficiency perspective. Which camera creates less friction and able to get the shot? When in the technical process should I choose efficiency over quality? I'm going to try to answer those questions, but first let's get down to the reason why the iPhone 15 has changed how I think about filmmaking. And the answer to that is H.265 log. Now, one of the biggest headlines about the iPhone 15 Pro's camera is that it could shoot in ProRes log. Now, this log profile is pretty stellar. I mean, the image quality is great, the dynamic range, none of that post-processing, sharpening, color work that iPhones do, or really any smartphone does to make an image look decent. It basically gives you a unfiltered look at what the camera is picking up on this sensor, and let me tell you, it's an amazing sensor. Now, the problem with ProRes log is just that the files are too big. On a 128 gigabyte iPhone, you can't even record in ProRes log without adding an external drive. Now, to me, adding an external drive kind of defeats the purpose of the simplicity of filming on a smartphone. And frankly, even if I did do that, the file sizes are just still too big for my liking. Honestly, I have a professional cinema camera here that shoots ProRes log video, and I never use it. I always shoot H.265 on here because the file sizes are way smaller. My computer can handle the editing, and also I don't really notice a difference in the image quality. So to get H.265 log footage out of this camera, I use the Blackmagic Design camera app. This allows me to use all the lenses on my iPhone, use all the manual settings, and shoot in H.265 with the Apple log profile. So now, in a split second, especially when it's mapped to the action button on my phone, I could be shooting H.265 log video manually in an instant. So I started playing around with this, and what really changed my perspective on things was this clip right here. It's just a clip of us walking down the beach in Cape Cod, and it wasn't a planned shot. It was just something I whipped out my phone and started filming just to test things out. And this shot truly blew me away. Once I actually looked at it, at the quality, the dynamic range, the colors, the stabilization, the wide angle lens, I started thinking about what would it take to get a shot like this with my mirrorless system, with my so-called professional camera system. So I want to do a little test to figure it out. Now, with this test, I don't just want to compare the final image quality. I want to compare the total time and effort and setup and all the gear that goes into getting a shot like this on a professional camera versus just whipping out my phone. So let's try it out. Okay, so the total pack up and setup time for this was about 5 minutes. And when it comes to a phone, it's about 2 seconds. Let's see how the footage looks. All right, now time for the iPhone. One thing that's also incredible about the iPhone 15 Pro is its wide angle image stabilization. With mirrorless cameras, there's sort of this phenomenon of this wide angle wobble when using image stabilization with a wide angle lens. The iPhone 15 Pro does not have that issue at this type of focal length. This is what happens when I have image stabilization on and I'm at my widest lens on my mirrorless camera.
not very good or usable.
Alright, now I'm reviewing the footage, looking at the mirrorless camera setup first with the gimbal. You know, the image looks great, it's a great camera, but the biggest thing I noticed are the micro jitters. Maybe this was operator error of me balancing the gimbal, but the thing that you gotta know about these gimbals is that they're powered by motors, and these motors vibrate. So, if you're using a camera that is pretty lightweight and doesn't have lens image stabilization or internal image stabilization, which this camera has, but as I mentioned earlier, doesn't work well with a wide angle lens, then you get these micro jitters in your image that just aren't great to look at. Now, I bet with some, warp stabilization or something like that in post, it would turn out pretty good looking, but, just right out of camera, image quality aside, those micro jitters just aren't great. All right, now let's look at the iPhone footage. I mean, this looks great. I'd say the dynamic range is comparable, if not maybe even a little better. No micro jitters. Now, one thing about this is the stabilization is a little floaty. So you get that little, floaty vibe. It's not exactly level, the horizon can kind of sway, which some people like that look, that floaty aesthetic. Other people want more of like a dolly look, which I'm sure you could achieve if you did put this phone on a gimbal with the image stabilization. But I mean, I'm pretty blown away by this. And again, image quality is great, dynamic range is great. Let's see how they look color graded and with some pixel peeping. So I've applied pretty much the same grade to these clips. They look pretty dang similar. I think the iPhone might even have more dynamic range, which might be like a post-processing thing on Apple's part, kind of making HDR in post, but this looks really, really good. Now let's take some still frames and see if we can pixel peep a little bit. So here are two stills sort of back to back, one from my iPhone and then one from the Canon R7. Now if we zoom in 10x here, the R7, the mirrorless camera, is definitely sharper. But I think that's partially due to the fact that I was shooting at a higher f-stop on my mirrorless camera. So more things will be in focus in the distance. If it's behind the focal point, then obviously it's going to be a little more out of focus. Now, it's a little hard to tell where the focal point was while shooting on the iPhone since it's autofocus. But let's try something like this wooden texture right here that's closer to the camera. Okay, yeah. I mean, obviously the R7 is going to be sharper, more detailed, it's got a bigger sensor, but it's pretty close. And one thing that I'm getting on this wide angle lens that I don't get on the iPhone lens is that there's this lens refraction happening. See the yellow discoloration, the purple discoloration on parts of the image? That's just signs of a cheaper lens, but with the iPhone, you don't get any of that. So that's pretty cool. And even with all that image comparison aside, whichever tool for the job you think works better, whatever. The thing that kind of stayed on my mind was that shot never would have existed if I just limited myself to my professional gear. I had all my camera equipment with me, but we were just going for a walk down the beach. I didn't really think to bring it, and let alone my gimbal and a wide angle lens and all that stuff. But because I had this power in my phone, I was able to get that professional level shot in an instant, and it never would have happened if I thought that this wasn't good enough. Now, on the flip side of things, one thing to consider is that I truly believe just having a regular camera out is just better. I think I tend to shoot more and different things when I have a camera in my hands versus when I don't, even if I have my phone on me. Now, this may sound silly, but trust me on this, as someone who takes cameras out with me everywhere, just the act of having a small camera like this just in your pocket or sitting out on the table just makes it so much easier to grab, start filming, and capture moments that you would never really think to just whip out your phone and start filming. Things just like walking down the street, you just whip out your camera because you have it. People see you with the camera and are like, hey, take a picture of me doing this. Hey, film us doing this. The amount of times I've had this camera just out on a table and people start grabbing it and filming stuff, it creates a lot of new moments that never would have happened because of the novelty of having a physical camera with you over just filming stuff on your smartphone. I know that seems silly, and it could take a mindset shift in myself to start intentionally using my phone camera more. But a lot of times when your phone's in your pocket, you don't really think about it. It's just part of you. But if you have one hanging around your neck, sitting on the table, you tend to capture more moments that you wouldn't necessarily do on your phone. And a lot of times it's those mundane, random moments that you really capture gold. But just because for me personally, I think having a physical camera separate from your phone is more conducive to getting great clips, because this phone can replace a lot of things in your camera bag. I mean, firstly, a big one is a camera monitor. You can connect most cameras these days via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to your phone and wirelessly control settings and preview your image. I mean, that's what I'm doing now with this iPad. And it's not just a novelty either. I mean, I was on a professional shoot the other day filming a concert, and I had a wide angle camera on a C-stand way up high, and I couldn't reach the settings or see the monitor, so I just attached my phone to the C-stand on a little clamp, and I could monitor everything. I could change settings as needed, and it honestly saved the day. Not only can this replace things like a camera monitor, but I think it's actually gonna replace this entire lens for me. So I shoot on APS-C size sensors, and this lens is my widest angle lens. It's an 11mm to 16mm f2.8. Now I got this lens because for a wide angle APS-C lens, it's very fast. It has a wide aperture, which gives you that shallow depth of field. But a problem with this lens specifically is that the autofocus noise is so loud. I mean, it makes it almost unusable when you're in a setting where you need to record audio, which is a bummer because at least for Canon, there's no wide angle lens that matches this aperture on the market really. And if I don't want that noisy autofocus, I'll have to go manual or increase my f-stop to the point where I don't get as much shallow depth of field. So if I have to do that anyway, why not just shoot on a wide angle lens like this? It has autofocus. It's obviously not going to get in as much shallow depth of field as this lens, but if I can't really utilize that in certain settings anyway, then why not just use this? Plus the whole process of, taking this lens on and off, replacing it with another lens, putting the caps back on, throwing it on a gimbal, stabilizing it. It's just too big of a hassle and a time consumer than just whipping this out and getting the shot. So I guess what this all really boils down to is that there's no real answer. And obviously every gig is going to be different. I wouldn't just throw this camera up on a C-stand to film a wide angle of a concert for 7 hours. In most cases, I don't think I'm going to be bringing that wide angle lens around with me in my camera bag if I'm just bopping around town or going on a hike or vlogging. It all really comes down to the shot you're trying to achieve, what budget you have, and what tools you just enjoy using most. And like I said, while I don't think my iPhone's going to be replacing much of my camera equipment right now, it's definitely thrown my creative thinking for a loop and made me rethink a lot of the ways and techniques that I make videos. It's kind of exciting. Does that make me less professional or more efficient or settling for quality? I don't know, but as long as I get the shot and can tell the story I want to tell, I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
But yeah, I'm hopping on a train to New York City in a couple hours here, and that's a type of trip where I normally at least bring this camera, or at least a couple cameras like I have in the past. But I think this time I might just bring my phone, see what kind of footage I can capture, just limiting myself to this. I got an Australia trip coming up, which I'd probably want to bring like 5 cameras for, but I'll be backpacking hostel to hostel, so I might have to slim down and see what this thing can replace in my camera bag. Boat horn.